I met Bill at a Park District conference I was at a few years ago before I worked for the association, and his presentation moved me quite a bit. So I think given that we have a pool, we also have open water, it's important for the association to understand the aspects, the potential liability. Bill has a very moving story, and it's I think it's timely given that we're getting ready to kick off swim season. So with that, take it away, Bill.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So my name is Bill O'Melia, and I'm here on behalf of the Drennan Streams Foundation. On behalf of the Drennan Streams Foundation, I'd like to thank the Hidden Valley Lake Association and all of you for allowing me here to speak to you this evening. I think it's very important, the message that we have to offer, and I hope that my hope and intent is that you guys can glean something from the information that we've learned over the years. So to give you a little bit of my background, I'm a general building contractor in Centennial, Colorado. It's a suburb about 15 miles south of downtown Denver. I've lived there for the past 21 years. I've been married to my wife, Melissa, for 26 years, and Melissa and I have 3 boys, Drennan Peter, 23, Quinn William, 20, and Sean Patrick, 17. June 6, 2020 marked 10 years since we lost Drennan to a fatal drowning incident. And in that time, there's not been a single day that's gone by that I don't think about Drennan and wish that I could turn back the clock, but it doesn't work that way. The world continued to turn and time moved on. People were born and people died. And to let you guys know the magnitude that is drowning, I want to share some statistics with you. I think it's extremely important that you guys understand that with the water aquatics environment that's attached to your community. So the World Health Organization tells us that globally, on an annual basis, 320,000 people die every year from drowning. In the 10 years since Drennan drowned, that's 3,200,000 fatal drownings in that 10-year time period between June 6, 2010 and June 6, 2020. You add to that non-fatal drownings, which can be anywhere between 4 to 7 times greater than fatal drownings. You add to that another 5 times as many non-fatal drownings. That's another 16 million individuals. 19,200,000 people have been involved in the drowning process in a severe way since June 6, 2010. That's a ridiculous number. It's hard to even imagine that number. And some of you may be thinking, you know, we can't control what goes on in a global world. We're concerned about what's happening right here in the United States, and that's fair enough. So let's go back to the number 10. 10 people on average die every day from drowning right here in the United States. That's 3,500 people annually, 35,000 in that 10-year time frame. Add to that another 175,000 non-fatal drownings. That's 210,000 people that have had a serious brush, a serious incident with the drowning process in that time frame. We are a first world country, a world leader. We can do better than that. We have to do better than that. So in May of 2014, I was invited to speak for the very first time to a group of 250 to 300 lifeguards with the Highlands Ranch Community Association, next community south of Centennial. And there was about 250 to 300 lifeguards there that evening. There was a TV news crew and there were several newspapers in attendance that night. And I was scared out of my mind. Not because that the media was present, but rather what was I going to say to those 250 to 300 16 to 19-year-old lifeguards? And I stood up there that evening and I simply told Drennan sorry. And something special happened. For the better part of an hour, they didn't look down at their cell phones. They listened intently and followed up our presentation with some very poignant and insightful questions. And Drennan's Dreams knew we were on to something. Since that time, we've reproduced the presentation, and we've spoke to tens of thousands of aquatics professionals, upper management, facility owners and operators all across the United States. And last year we were supposed to go up to Toronto, Canada, but the COVID pandemic put a halt to that. So we're still hoping to get out internationally. Every year, we filmed a piece for the American Red Cross that's part of their curriculum. And every year, 325,000 lifeguards and lifeguard managers see a portion of Drennan's story as part of their certification process. It's in a training video called Not on Your Watch. And we initially chose to speak to lifeguards because we felt they were in the best position to make an immediate impact day in and day out at the aquatics fronts, whether it be a pool or an open water setting. Many of those people, many of those young lifeguards who have heard Drennan's story have moved on to college, they've gotten married, life has changed, and lifeguards turn over about every 2 to 3 years. So we know that the Drennan's Dreams mission is ongoing with regards to lifeguards. We feel that there is another group that can make a longer, more lasting impact, and that is you, management. And when I speak about management, I'm not just talking about the aquatic supervisors or directors. I'm talking about the owners or boards of directors of facilities and organizations at the top, facility management, general managers, all the way through that chain of command to the aquatic supervisor. All are part and integral to running safe operations and ensuring that every patron or member goes home safe at the end of the day. That's always the #1 priority, that everybody goes home safe at the end of the day. Some of you may have seen a portion of our lifeguarding presentation in the past, and today we want to switch things up and share with you the role management played in our story. And before we go too far, I'd like to show you guys a video. The video you just watched was shot on June 5th, 2010, as Drennan swam the anchor leg of the medley relay. On June 6, 2010, the very next day, Drennan went back to the pool to attend a private pool party. He was pulled unconscious from the shallow end of the pool. The day Drennan was most in need of surveillance, he went unnoticed for at least 5 minutes and probably closer to 10 minutes before the fellow child swimmers recognized him and retrieved him from the water. Give you an idea what kind of kid Drennan was. Drennan was a smart, outgoing, athletic, and caring young man. He was involved in Brain Bowl, Chess Club, and Scrabble Club. He went to Washington, D.C. with the Junior National Youth Leadership Conference. He was an avid golfer who professed to have shot par on our little par 3 9-hole course up at the country club just 3 days before he drowned. He was a starting quarterback, defensive end, and punter on his youth tackle football team. Drennan was the center on his basketball team. He swam the anchor leg on both the medley and freestyle relay teams, and he excelled at his individual swimming events. Drennan had qualified for All-Stars in all 3 of his events the day before he drowned. So what happened? On the evening of Drennan's death, there were about 35 youth in attendance for the party, at least 2 adults and 2 lifeguards on duty. The 2 lifeguards were the head lifeguard, who was 21 years old with 7 years of experience, and her sister, the assistant head lifeguard, who was 18 years old with 4 years of experience. And both lifeguards had worked shifts earlier that day. So at the facility where this happened, the lifeguarding stations look like this. There's a 6-foot fixed high stand with a swivel chair, and that chair could turn and look at most of the pool, and it never moved. And then there was a lower movable lifeguard stand that would move up and down the pool deck depending on what was taking place. Sometimes they'd put it directly across from the high lifeguard stand if there were swim meets going on, and if the kids false started off the diving blocks, they could drop a lane rope and stop them. But for most of the general operations of the facility, that lower lifeguard stand was in this general vicinity, and that's where it was on the evening of Drennan's death. So here's what we know took place based on statements. So at around just before 7 p.m., Drennan and his mom walked through the side gate where the party guests were attending. The pool was shut down for normal operations just before 7 o'clock, and it was only open for the private pool party. So Drennan and his mom walked in. The parents were setting up underneath a patio cover up here for the pool party. Drennan set his stuff down. Melissa said hello to the parents and talked to them for a little bit, and then she watched Drennan head off towards the swimming pool. Drennan spent about 10 minutes with another boy going off the diving boards, and they were taking turns throwing a tennis ball to each other, trying to catch it in midair before entering the water. The next place Drennan was seen was hanging out along the shallow end pool wall with a group of boys, and they're talking to each other and they're greeting party guests as they come through this gate. The last place Drennan was seen was with a group of boys playing on a large flotation device, a large raft in the shallow end of the pool, and they were playing a game called King of the Hill. And King of the Hill essentially consists of one of them trying to climb on top of the raft while the rest of them try and yank him off of it. And despite several witnesses to this, both lifeguards said that no horseplay was taking place on that evening. So at approximately 7:30 p.m., 3 girls were playing with a beach ball in somewhat of a triangular shaped formation in the shallow end of the pool. Let me see if I have this next slide. No. Somewhat of a triangular shaped formation in the shallow end of the pool. And one of the girls hit the beach ball over another girl's head, and as she went to retrieve it in this vicinity right here, she noticed a boy underwater with his back kind of slightly slouched against the pool walls that starts to turn vertical, and his skin color wasn't right and he wasn't moving. So she calls one of the other girls over to take a look, and she comes over and she noticed that his skin color is all gray and purple, and he's not moving. They then called a boy over that they knew from further over in the shallow end. He comes over, he sees that things aren't right, goes under and grabs Drennan and begins to lift him out of the water, essentially beginning the rescue. And all of this took place under the surveillance of 2 trained lifeguards on duty. So the boy began to move with Drennan in his arms towards the only lifeguard he could see, the assistant lifeguard in the high stand on the opposite side of the pool. All the kids that knew what was going on began yelling for the lifeguard for help. So the lifeguard in the high stand, she yells for her sister, who's either inside this lifeguard shack or at the picnic table, which is actually a little bit further over here. It was never clearly determined exactly where she was, but she was somewhere in the vicinity of this lifeguard shack. So she comes running down the pool deck, enters the water, meets the boy about halfway across the pool, takes Drennan from him, and continues in the same path of travel towards the opposite side of the pool from where Drennan was found within 5 feet of this unoccupied lifeguard chair. To give you a little bit of perspective, Drennan was 5 feet 8 inches tall. He was tall for a 12-year-old, and he was found in 3.5 to 4 feet of water. So the lifeguard in the high stand, she never deployed into the water. She blew her whistle to alert the other child swimmers, climbed down out of the stand, herded all the other swimmers inside the clubhouse, and then she called 911. The time of the 911 call was 7:33:12, approximately 3 minutes and 12 seconds after Drennan was first recognized. I don't know if you guys picked up on it in the 911 call, but she never, that was the assistant lifeguard that was on the phone. She never identified herself as a lifeguard or rescue personnel on scene to the 911 operator. She did not know the address of the facility that she worked at, and she never attempted to use, and she never returned to help with CPR until after the paramedics were on scene, thus leaving the head lifeguard to perform CPR with an untrained individual. So the head lifeguard, she moves Drennan over to this side of the pool where the birthday girl's father lifts him out of the pool. The head lifeguard checks Drennan for pulse and breathing and then begins chest compressions while instructing the father to give rescue breaths. There was no breathing mask on the premises, and I don't know if you guys picked up on it in the 911 call, but the 911 operator, the AED on scene was never on site, was never attempted to be used. The 911 operator asks her if there's an AED on site, and she says, no, not here, I don't think so. That AED sat in a box. She was making the telephone call from right here by this door. There's a phone on the wall right here. The front desk is right here. That AED sat in a box on the counter behind the front desk in plain view, 20 to 30 feet away from where she was making that 911 call. So the paramedics were dispatched at 7:34 p.m. and arrived on scene within 4 minutes, which is very quick response time. Drennan was transported to the nearest hospital, Littleton Adventist, and after fighting for his life for nearly 2 hours, our beautiful boy's heart quit beating for the final time, and Drennan Peter O'Melia became a fatal drowning statistic at 9:17 p.m., June 6, 2010. The subsequent autopsy and coroner's report found that Drennan had died from accidental drowning. There was no trauma, no head injury, or underlying medical condition. The EKG performed at the hospital reflected no long QT. Studies performed on Drennan's brain as part of a study at the University of Maryland detected no brain issues, and after years of cellular studies on his heart tissue at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, no heart abnormalities have been detected. The medical evidence supports that Drennan simply drowned. So it wasn't long after Drennan drowned that information began to come out to our family. Information about the fact that the children found him and not the lifeguards, where he was found in relationship to the unoccupied lifeguard chair, the fact that the AED was never attempted to be used, and some other information. So my wife and I consulted an attorney. And after consulting that attorney, we filed an insurance claim against the country club, the general manager, and both lifeguards. That claim turned into a full-blown trial in October of 2013. And what I'm going to share with you next is what we learned through depositions and at trial. So we know that the head lifeguard started out the party from about 6:58 p.m., started out the party in the high stand from about 6:58 p.m. until around 7:28 p.m. when they did the shift change. The assistant lifeguard, she started out the party inside that lifeguard shack or at the picnic table right next to it while the lower lifeguard stand went empty. So at around 7:28 p.m., the assistant lifeguard walks behind the diving blocks around the diving boards and stands at the base of the high stand. She calls up to her sister. She's supposedly surveying the pool while the head lifeguard climbs down out of the stand. The head lifeguard then watches the pool while the assistant lifeguard climbs up into the stand. Then the head lifeguard heads back to that lifeguard shack following the same path of travel that the assistant lifeguard took. Neither one of them walked around the pool this way past where Drennan lay submerged within 5 feet of that chair. According to the statements of both lifeguards, approximately a minute after switching positions, the assistant lifeguard was alerted that Drennan was unconscious by the fellow child swimmers. She then yelled to the head lifeguard, "Drennan's unconscious." Both of these young ladies knew who Drennan was. They lived on my block for several years. I played golf with their father in men's league on Wednesday nights, so when he came up out of the water, they knew who he was. Neither of the lifeguards observed that initial rescue taking place. So, Dr. Jerome Modell, he's a leading expert in the pathophysiology of drowning. Basically, the act of drowning and what the human body goes through during the drowning process. He testified that Drennan was underwater for at least 5 minutes and probably closer to 10 minutes before being rescued. And Dr. Modell based this testimony on the medical evidence: pulmonary and cerebral edema, irreversible cardiac arrest, the weight of the fluid in the lungs, and the length of time it takes for the drowning process to occur. And what I'm going to share with you next is one of Dr. Modell's statements from the trial, and it's really important because it is a very finite amount of time and a very small amount of time in which you have to operate between the time somebody becomes unconscious in the water and the time that things become irreversible. And here's what Dr. Modell said. Dr. Modell said that if the time of submersion to retrieval exceeds 3 to 4.5 minutes, the victim will suffer a cardiac arrest, as happened in this case. If retrieval and resuscitative measures are performed in less than 3 minutes, the vast majority of such victims do survive, and they survive normally with follow-up care. Once 5 minutes has expired from the onset of submersion until retrieval and appropriate resuscitative measures are performed, less than half of such victims can be resuscitated, and many of them have at least some element of residual brain damage. Once 10 minutes has expired, in less than 10% can an effective heartbeat be obtained, and virtually all of those victims have devastating hypoxic brain damage. The CAT scan performed at the hospital revealed that Drennan would have fallen into this latter category. Dr. Modell's testimony was never rebutted by anyone from the medical profession at trial. It sounds like a bad day for the lifeguards, right? In October of 2013, a jury in Arapahoe County, Colorado saw things differently. There was a 6-day trial, 7 if you count jury selection. When the trial ended, the jury returned a verdict finding the country club, the general manager, and both lifeguards responsible for the death of Drennan. As part of that jury verdict, the jury had to assign responsibility, and this is what they determined. They determined that the country club or the corporation was 65% responsible, the general manager was 25% responsible, the head lifeguard 6% responsible, and the assistant head lifeguard 4% responsible. 90% of responsibility was delegated to upper management. That's why this presentation is just not for the aquatics folks. So we went back to court for an additional hearing on reckless conduct on December 9th of 2013, and reckless in a civil trial is akin to manslaughter. The main factor in reckless is that the defendant knew that their conduct was dangerous to those around them, or if they didn't know that their conduct was dangerous, they should have known. It was dangerous. The judge ruled on the reckless and found in our favor against all 4 defendants. That verdict was never entered. We were headed towards years of appeals and more litigation, and it would have probably been another 3 to 5 years. We had 2 other boys at home that needed our attention, and at that point we reached an agreement, a settlement was reached, and we dropped it right there. So that reckless verdict was never officially entered, even though it was ruled on. people and facilities have been criminally charged in drowning cases. There's one such case, a friend of mine, Lori Cerami, down in South Lake, Texas. Her daughter, Elise, was a 13-year-old competitive swimmer with the U.S. Swimming organization, a USA Swimming sanctioned organization. And during swim practice, the coaches were assigned with watching 2 lanes each. And there's video footage of the coach assigned to Elise's lane leaves the screen for about 9 to 9.5 minutes and comes back with a cup of coffee. And during that time, Elise had gone down while swimming laps, and the kids found her. And Elise subsequently died. There were criminal charges brought against that coach, and she was found guilty. The parents intervened at the sentencing phase and didn't want her to do jail time, but that coach it's my understanding that that coach can no longer work with youth and can't be associated with aquatic sports anymore for the remainder of her life, I guess. So I think we can all agree that a properly managed pool is a source of fun, exercise, educational opportunity to teach swimming lessons, and it's a revenue stream for a facility by drawing in patrons or members. Conversely, a mismanaged pool can become a dangerous environment where possible incident outcomes can be a fatal drowning incident, a non-fatal drowning incident with severe injuries, some of which can last the victim the remainder of their life, and non-fatal drowning with no injuries. So the American Red Cross, the system under which these 2 lifeguards were trained and who the country clubs was following their guidelines, has 2 basic manuals. The Lifeguarding Management Manual and the Lifeguarding Manual. These ones are from around the time that Drennan drowned, but it still holds true today. So in the 24 years that the general manager was in charge of that country club, the man in that position had never once opened a lifeguarding training manual or lifeguarding management manual. The country club did not own either manual or know where to purchase them. The club manager was in charge of the clubhouse, the golf course, and the swimming pool operations, which included the lifeguards. And I ask, how can someone in a management position know if their employees are doing a good job or not if they never bothered to learn what those job duties entail? So, some sample organizational charts look like this. These are courtesy of our friends at the American Red Cross, owner, council, board of directors at the top, camp director. And over here, facility management, lifeguard supervisor, and lifeguards, it kind of breaks it down. And here is another one. So no matter what your organizational setup looks like, it's vital that each position above ensures that the positions below have the abilities to understand and perform their job duties in a professional manner. In our case, the board hired a general manager to run the swimming pool operations, which included the lifeguards, yet he had no certified trained knowledge of how those lifeguarding operations should be conducted. So at this facility, after 40 years of operation, a 1-page policies and procedures document had been produced titled Lifeguard Responsibilities. You're looking at the document right here. That's my highlighter on there. So after, no emergency action plans existed at this facility. So in Colorado, the outdoor pools typically open Memorial Weekend and close after the Labor Day weekend. Our golf courses go dormant after the first few snowstorms. So during the winter months when little or no club activity was taking place, they went to waste. During those quiet periods, policies and procedures, emergency action plans, in-depth in-service training, and all that planning could have taken place. And other important steps could have taken place as well. They were not. It did not happen. Those years went to waste, and those winters went to waste. So at this facility, number 6 of this lifeguarding policy, lifeguard responsibilities sheet, number 6 states that lifeguards should rotate stations every 30 minutes. Stations consist of deep, shallow, and rover. That's what the American Red Cross recommends for that L-shaped pool in an ideal world. But number 6 further goes on to say that the rover is responsible for checking the grounds and the bathrooms for neatness, as well as checking the office for messages, essentially taking away one of the 3 lifeguards recommended by the American Red Cross for that shaped pool. Number 6 was not followed on the evening of Drennan's death. So record keeping is also an important part of management's job duties, and in over 40 years of operation, only one in-service training document could be produced. That's it. It was not signed and dated by who conducted the training, but we know it occurred approximately 1 month after Drennan drowned, and it was to have all the lifeguards trained on that particular AED that the country club owned. Not all lifeguards were in attendance for that training, and no further in-services were recorded for the remainder of the summer till after the pool closed down after the Labor Day weekend. So a year or 2 before Drennan drowned, there was a club-wide survey taken over everything to do with the club. You know, how's the food at the snack shack? Should kids under 9 be allowed to play on the golf course? Are the front desk ladies too crabby? You know, all kinds of different stuff was asked in this survey. And there were some responses given back regarding the lifeguards, and several responses given back. And one example of one of the responses was the lifeguards seemed inattentive and ill-prepared to handle an emergency. And when the board was questioned about that, and the general manager was questioned, what follow-up was conducted, what action was taken regarding these statements that came back with the lifeguards, the answer was nothing. They didn't, no follow-up was conducted, no action was ever taken. So what I'm going to show you next are some slides from Maria Bella, a friend of ours that we've co-presented with on a national level with a company called Aqua Conscious, and they've done some scientific studies to determine what lifeguards can actually see in different environments, and it's kind of amazing, and I want to share this with you because it's kind of important that you as management understand what can actually be seen and what can't be seen, because it's kind of hard for a 16-year-old first-year lifeguard to tell you what they can't see when they probably don't know what they can't see. Oops. So these, I lost those. Oops, sorry, those photos aren't in here. Oops, sorry about that, folks. So I don't have Maria's slides in this presentation, sorry. These photos were sent to me by a friend of mine. And I received the first photo, and in this photo, the lifeguard appears to be sleeping. And she's got, looks like denim capri shorts on, and she's sleeping. And our friend was really upset about the whole endeavor and called me and didn't know what to do. And about 10 minutes later, she sent me the second photo. And in this photo, the lifeguard wakes up and gets on her cell phone and appears to be opening a bag of potato chips. And our friend was really upset about this, and she didn't know what to do, and I asked for the phone number of the facility that they were staying at, and I called and introduced myself to the aquatic supervisor, and I said, do you know what's happening at your facility right now? And she said, no, and she looked out the window, and then she saw it, and she said, I'll take care of this. But why I share these with you is because if your lifeguards or your staff, whatever the situation is, conducts themselves like this, they may find themselves going, being on the 6 o'clock news or going viral on some form of social media. The public has the right to know about health safety issues, and this could be interpreted as a health safety issue right here. And what kind of environment exists where any staff member or management would think that this is okay behavior to conduct while on duty? Very clear choice was made by this lifeguard to act in this manner. Very clear choices were also made in Drennan's case by all involved. The choice to not have 3 lifeguards on duty, the choice to not sit in the second lifeguard chair, the choice to not have more frequent adequate training, the choice to not learn about lifeguarding or lifeguarding management by the general manager, the choice to not train all of the staff on the AED in its location, the choice to not have an emergency action plan, the choice by the board to not insist that the general manager undergo any training to manage lifeguards, and the choice by the board and the general manager to not follow up on the survey responses and take corrective action. So when I was going through putting the presentations together for lifeguarding and lifeguarding management, with regards to lifeguards, it was very apparent that lifeguards have one primary duty. And that primary duty is patron surveillance. Early recognition is the key. But when I was going through the management presentation, it wasn't quite so clear to me what management's primary duty was. And I started looking into it, and so I started asking, is management's primary duty to have proper policies and procedures and emergency action plans in place? Is it holding frequent in-service trainings and evaluations to have the best prepared aquatic staff that you can possibly have? Is it continually evaluating potential risks at your facility and working to eliminate them? Is it keeping yourself currently educated about your job and that of your staffs that you're in charge of? Or is it combining all of these elements together so that you can ensure the safest possible environment for your patrons, members, and staff? During the lifeguarding presentations, I frequently ask lifeguards, at your facility, what is an acceptable amount of time for someone to lay unconscious unnoticed in the water? Is it 1 minute? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 3 minutes? Is it 4 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? I asked that question in that manner because Drennan was underwater for at least 5 minutes before being recognized. And if your acceptable amount of time is less than 1 minute, make sure that you have the proper staff, processes, and training in place to achieve that. It is incumbent upon you as management from the highest levels of the board or owners all the way down to that aquatic supervisor that you know what's taking place with your operations such that you are providing a safe facility for all. I have shown you that if a fatal drowning incident takes place, no one gets to distance themselves from responsibility. The expectations and the protocols you set forth will set the standard for professionalism at your facility. What you do as a manager or as a board may very well mean the difference between life and death. And please remember always that drowning is preventable. So with that, that's the end of it, and I apologize that I didn't have those slides in there for you. I will send them to you, Randy, and you guys can put them out there so that you know what lifeguards can see and can't see, because it's important that you evaluate your operations in your facility in all kinds of different environments. You know, what a lifeguard may be able to see from one side of the pool at 12 o'clock in the afternoon may not be the same that they can see at 7 o'clock in the evening looking directly in the sun. If you allow noodles or rafts in your swimming pool and there's a large amount of people, is one lifeguard or two lifeguards adequate to see that entire pool at during all those different and varying conditions? And it's important that if you're short-staffed, if people call in sick, that you empower your staff to possibly think about either shutting down all the pool or a portion of the pool, depending on what the situation calls for. You don't want to create a dangerous environment. We as humans do not have gills, so water is inherently dangerous to us. But it's also important that we learn how to swim and learn how to manage the water properly, because we are also drawn to it for all the purposes that I mentioned: education, recreation, all the different things that we can do in the water, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should utilize it and learn to manage it in the proper and professional way. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions from you guys. Anything you want to know about what transpired here? Anything you
Don't
want
wait
to know
your mic,
about
Ted.
what's going on in the community or our lives personally?
Hi
Feel free
there.
to ask.
Ted
Yeah.
Long.
Ted,
Have you seen our pool?
I have. I visited it today.
How many lifeguards do you think should be on duty up there?
That one probably, depending on the amount of people in the water, probably two.
Two,
At least. I'm not a professional aquatics
Yeah.
person, but based on the situation, like at our pool where it was L-shaped and the diving well was open with 2 lifeguards and kids lined up, people lined up going off the diving board 2 at a time, your natural instinct and inclination, and it was on that evening as well, your natural inclination as a human being would be to watch those people going off the diving board to make sure somebody didn't jump on top of somebody else in the water. So for that, with only 1 lifeguard up in the chair, to ask that lifeguard to scan 270 degrees of swimming pool and also manage the people coming off the diving boards is too much to ask. It's physically impossible to do that in the amount of time that they are trained to scan the area in which they're supposed to cover. So it can't happen. It's too much. Do we have any other questions?
What was the potential liability of the association there in this perspective of, if you want to reveal how much you actually collected versus maybe what your attorney thought?
That is one of the answers I can't give. You
Okay.
can go
Oh,
online
okay.
and there's news articles about it. But what could have happened, I will tell you that the investigating officer, so the initial responding police officers took reports. Then when the investigative officer did his investigation, he didn't show up until an hour and a half after the incident had occurred, and everybody had gone home except the general manager and the 2 lifeguards. And he conducted his investigation over a 2 or 3 month period. And it consisted of asking the youth in attendance at the party about 5 questions over the phone with their parents there. In his investigation report, he didn't show the location of where Drennan was found. He didn't even show the second lifeguard chair. And I don't know if he had really listened to the 911 call because there was no mention of the AED in any of his reports. And he was kind of surprised when he was questioned at trial about it. So, it was up to the district attorney in Arapahoe County to level criminal charges, and my feeling that, when they determined that no foul play had taken place, they didn't pursue the criminal charges, but I know that they do take place. We went through grief counseling at Children's Hospital with another family, and they had lost their daughter to a drowning incident. She was in the care of the nanny. And the nanny took the little girl out to the swimming pool, and the nanny's older friend joined them, and they got to talking, and they got on their cell phones, and the little girl drowned in front of them. And Denver made all the witnesses stay there till they got statements from all of them, and they did file criminal charges against that nanny, and she did pled guilty to it. So it can and does happen. As far as the civil suit, we went through the trial, and I will tell you this, it wasn't like we were out to get money and we're out to get the country club. They weren't changing their patterns of behavior. The country club, the general manager, and both lifeguards filed a suit against the little girl's parents who hosted the party. She signed their rental agreement, which in the rental agreement she indemnified and said she'd hold them harmless. But they sued her, but really they should have been representing her because they were also members of the country club. So that case was kicked out of the court system, and the family ended up getting some kind of settlement as well. But they tried to put the blame on them. And what I didn't talk about in this presentation that I talked about earlier today in the lifeguarding one is in August of 2010, after Drennan drowned, a lady brought our family dinner one evening, and she was upset, and she got around eventually to relaying a story to me of having been up at the country club a day or 2 prior with a friend who was looking to join. And while they were there, they went out to the swimming pool, and it's late August, the numbers are starting to dwindle down at the pool. And while they're out there, there's about 10 to 15 swimmers in the water, and the 2 lifeguards on duty were down by that lifeguard shack reading books or magazines. 2 months after Drennan drowned, after a fatal drowning in their pool, and they're reading books or magazines, hanging out in lounge chairs. So we ate dinner, and after dinner, I took my middle child, Quinn, to football practice at a nearby park, and Quinn's like hyper tuned into what's going on up there. His older brother, his hero, has just drowned up there 2 months prior. So as we're driving past the club, Quinn looks through the tennis courts, and he's like, "Dad, there's swimmers in the water, and there's no lifeguards up in the stand." So I take him to the park, and I drop him off, and take his gear into the park for him, and hop back in my pickup truck, and I drive back. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching from the parking lot, and sure enough, there's about 10 to 15 swimmers in the water, and the 2 lifeguards are reading books or magazines and down at the lounge chairs. So I was mad. I went hauling inside the clubhouse, and I said, "Do you know what's going on out there?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, you've got swimmers in the water, and these lifeguards are reading books or magazines, not watching the pool." And she said, "Well, they've been talked to about that." So I asked for a complaint form, and they didn't have them for the pool, they only had them for the golf course. And I said, "That'll have to do." And I filled it out, and it wasn't duplicate or triplicate, so I insisted she make me a copy so it didn't get thrown away. And I took it with me, and I went home. And a day or two later, I got a call from the general manager, and he said, "Hey, I'm sorry that happened. The girls," meaning the head lifeguard and the assistant head lifeguard, "left specific instructions about that before they went back to school. So they've gone back to college, and they've left all those young lifeguards unsupervised till after the pool closed over the Labor Day weekend, after they had a fatal drowning at their facility." So we went through with the lawsuit because they weren't changing their patterns of behavior. You know, things were going to keep on keeping on the same way they were unless somebody forced that change through them. And that was the only avenue we had available to us to make them stop conducting their operations in the manner that they were. And that was our only legal remedy, so we pursued it. You know, it's got to be kind of a perfect storm for it to end up at a full-blown trial like that and go all the way through to the very end, but it did happen, you know, and you know, it's one of those things that took place. Sometimes it just needs to happen. So.
When we spoke earlier, you mentioned kind of the apathy of the GM.
Yeah.
Mention that a little bit.
At trial, he said in all of his years, 24 years of operation, those were his 2 best lifeguards, and he also said that he would have done nothing differently. So a child's life was lost, and he would have done nothing differently. In October of 2010, that man was terminated from his position. There was other stuff besides the drowning incident and the not following through with the training of the AED. We were right next to an elementary school, and they had let the alcohol exclusion policy lapse, the insurance that covers, you know, alcohol on the premises, and they had let it lapse. It was really hard to recover that alcohol policy being right next to a public elementary school. And the reason they found it, there was a surplus of money from the men's league for beer, you know, from the ice chest that people were taking. So there was the drowning death, the lack of follow through and the mandate by the board of directors, because there was an older gentleman that had had a heart attack on the course in October or November of 2009, so they bought the AED in case something like that were to ever happen again, and mandated that all staff, not just the aquatic staff, but all staff, front desk people, the grounds crew, every snack shack people, everybody was to be trained on that AED and its usage, and there was no follow through with it. So he was terminated in October of 2010. There were elections held in November of 2010, and a different group of people ran for the board. They got control of the board, and they rehired the gentleman. After they rehired him, of the 750 or so memberships at the facility, about 320 of them left and took their revenue with them. And the country club spiraled down for quite a few years. It fell on very, very hard times and almost went under. It started to rebound a little bit recently with new board and new management and the way things were taking place, but it was really touch and go there for a while.
Now, you did this earlier because I walked into this room by accident. Did you make this presentation?
It's a little bit different for the lifeguards.
Okay.
Some of the stuff is still the same, but some of it is also different.
Yeah.
Because the facts surrounding his death.
Right. It's so powerful. And when you give the numbers, all of a sudden I realized I have 4 people that one baby in a bathtub because the phone rang. One, I haven't mentioned this before, my best friend, 8 years old, they were at a lake, and they were kind of up a hill, and she was in an inner tube, but she didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
And they never made it down. They saw it, they actually saw it, but the water's muddy. And
Yeah.
they couldn't, so it's such, it is, when you say so many, it just really, I thought, God, I mean, what a number.
So I'm leaving this with you guys, and this is a smaller version than where we're up to now, but this is Families United to Prevent Drowning. It's a group of organizations just like ours from all around the country. And these are people that have lost loved ones or nearly lost loved ones in drowning incidents. Some of these stories in here are related to the Virginia Graham-Baker Act, which is the Pool and Spa Safety Drain Cover Act. They were instrumental in getting VGB passed. And since VGB has passed, they have not lost one person in a public pool to a drain entrapment. And I think that was 11 or 12 years ago now that VGB passed. They didn't mandate it for private pools, backyard pools, but since it's happened and since the statistical data backs up that the drain entrapments do not occur with the proper drain covers fitting, it's starting to occur in private pools because they no longer sell the old type of, manufacturers don't sell the old type of drain covers anymore. And when new houses are built, they're required to have the proper drain covers in place. So even though laws weren't passed for personal and private pools, the industry has noted and stood up and taken note that these things are dangerous if not properly fitted, and those drownings have started to be, like I say, in public pools, there's been no drain entrapment drowning since that time, and even in the private pools, it's starting to go away without having that regulation affixed to it. And I will tell you this, I'm not here to tell you guys how to run your facilities or whatever. I'm just trying to share the information that I've learned the hard way over life and what I've picked up from national organizations that we're affiliated with. Drennan's Dreams has a seat on the executive committee for Families United to Prevent Drowning. I encourage you to go to the website. It's a really slick website. It's full of information, and it's sad all the different ways that people can drown, and they're all in there. And what I would encourage you guys to do is you can manage your facilities, and I know it's tough and sometimes there's not funds to be able to do every single thing that you want to do, but there's steps that you can take. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, they were involved in VGB getting passed, and around the same time, they launched a thing called the Pool Safely Campaign. And the Pool Safely Campaign is directed towards parents, and it talks about how to prevent drownings. And they talk about water watchers. They have a water watcher video. So like, people that come to your lakefront or something, you don't necessarily have lifeguards down there, but maybe you start to talk to parents and tell them how important this drowning is. And, maybe just one day take the time to not get on your cell phone. Designate one parent for a 15-minute span or a 20-minute span to be the designated water watcher for the group, and commit to not being distracted during that 15-minute time period, and watch those that are your loved ones or those that are in the immediate vicinity of your loved ones, and make sure that nothing transpires. And those are kind of steps that you guys can take. That information's out there. It's free to the public. All you have to do is request it from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. There's so many steps that can be taken to mitigate and help lower the rate of drownings. We're fighting a battle. You know, the numbers have held pretty steady for a long time period, but we're fighting population growth and more pools being developed. So that battle is always, it's a constant battle to get those drowning numbers down, yet fighting that population growth. But there's steps that can be taken. I will tell you this, and I tell the lifeguards in the lifeguarding presentation, that lifeguards save lives. The numbers and the statistical data back it up. I just saw a study, because I'm part of United States Water Safety Action Plan. We're developing, the United States does not have a comprehensive water safety plan in place, and it's a 2-year process to develop it. And we're working with like the American Association of Pediatrics and other folks to develop guidelines and best practices, and hopefully, you know, it's up to the people whether they adopt it at national, state, local level, or just utilize it and implement and take the information in there to try and make their facilities safer. And it's important that we work to eliminate this, because the main goal is that at the end of the day that every patron go home safe, and every aquatics professional, everybody affiliated with your organization has a positive experience, you know, when they reach the, when they go home at the end of the day from an aquatics environment. And what I tell the lifeguards is they're the last best defense against a drowning incident. There's nobody better prepared to prevent that drowning at their facilities as they are. Even medical professionals, they can deal with the after effects of the drowning, but they don't know how to scan and extract the way that a lifeguard does to prevent that drowning from taking place in the first place. And the statistical data backs it up that lifeguards save lives. I think it was like, I saw in this one report, it was like 157, 175 over a 10-year time span from 2000 to 2010, and then it held steady, that same number, for 2010 to 2020. And that's the number that drown in an aquatics environment when lifeguards are present, which is huge. I mean, in both a pool setting and an open water environment. And so they do save lives if properly managed, and if they properly surveil the environment. It can be greatly beneficial. So, any other questions? You guys, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I wish we could speak to more boards of directors and more management. It's important, it's integral that you work together to create that environment, to have the safest possible running facilities and operations that you can. So with that, thank you, and I'll leave you guys with this stuff.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Feel free to reach out to me anytime with any questions.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Very powerful presentation. Thank you so much.